Parliament. A very good morning, Reinier. Thanks for making the time to speak to us.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
A lot has been said about the history of this building. What are your thoughts as you saw it go to flames yesterday?
Yes, I was completely shocked. It's a great tragedy. The building itself is quite old. Maybe just the background to the parliamentary complex. It consists of 3 buildings. The National Council of Provinces, which is the oldest one, constructed in 1885. And then the middle building between the NCOP and the new assembly or National Assembly is the old assembly, which was built in 1910, and the architect is Herbert Baker. As far as I know, that is the where the fire started, in the old assembly building, and what I've seen in the press is the roof collapsed, and yeah, that seems to be where the most of the damage is, and then some of the damage extended into the National Assembly, which was constructed in 1988, which is a fairly modern new building. But yes, it was quite devastating. I was involved in the last 4 years with the refurbishment of the National Council of Provinces building right next door. And all the buildings are linked with passages, so there's no, the fire can easily spread from one building to the next.
So that involvement you're talking about is referred to as the Conservation Management Plan. Just looking at the damage, how much of what you refurbished has been damaged, and what could be the cost?
I haven't been able to get to Parliament yet. I'm just waiting for my project managers at the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure to give me the green light. I think the part that I worked on is not damaged at all, the NCOP. It seems to be mainly focused on at the old assembly. But I speak under correction, as I haven't been there to ascertain for myself if there's any damage to the National Council of Provinces building, where the main library is housed, where valuable artifacts and books are kept.
So were you involved at all in the refurbishment of that part of Parliament that was damaged by a minor fire last year? And how far was that progressed? And was that not impacted at all?
That fire last year did not impact on us. That was still part of the old assembly, which wasn't part of our contract. We were aware of it, and luckily there wasn't any damage that happened to the NCOP at that stage.
Yeah. We don't know what decision the President and government is taking at this point, but it looks like extensive damage. What are your initial predictions in terms of what it could cost to fix what went wrong yesterday?
It will run into the millions. It is what I've seen. It is extensive, as you've mentioned. And not only the building itself, but the artifacts and artworks that may have been lost due to the fire, you cannot replace those. So the sooner one can get in and try and save what is still there to be saved, the better. It almost reminds one of the fire at the UCT library, where a lot of books were damaged, but due to very quick action by the community and by heritage people, they could save quite a number of books.
Unfortunately, we're going to ask you to just hold on for a minute. We just want to go live to Parliament. Moloto Matapo is addressing media. Let's take you there live.
Of the damage that has been caused by this fire, particularly in this building, which the firefighters had to battle the whole day in order to contain the situation. So once they are done with the inspection, then they will come outside and they will come and brief you. Of course, one of the reports that will be received during the course of this meeting that is currently underway will be whether, having conducted a preliminary assessment, the building is safe enough to even enter to conduct the inspection. And thereafter, of course, they will then determine how they go about the inspection, and then you will be briefed, maybe between 1 to 2 hours from now, you will be briefed. So I thought that let me come out to brief you about what is happening, so that you have got some expectation of what is going to happen in the next 2 hours or so.
The Chief Whip's meeting at 12.
And there is a Chief Whip's meeting as well that will also be briefed, yes, at 12. So that meeting will follow after this one that is taking place now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was the spokesperson for Parliament, Muloto Motapo. He was just briefing us as the media that there is a meeting. All the presiding officers of Parliament have arrived here, and some of the leadership of Parliament is here. They are meeting now, and then they will brief the media later on. I am now joined by the DA Chief Whip, Natasha Mazone, as members of political parties are arriving here in Parliament to see for themselves the damage that has been done. Natasha, extensive damage to this institution.
As you can see, our beautiful building, the roof burnt down, collapsed inwards. You can see the smoke damage right across. My only hope is that Madiba looks on, and I know that we will be able to build and rise from the ashes. But for many MPs, this has been our home. For me, it's been my home for 12 years. We spend sometimes 18 hours a day in this building. We spend more time here than we do in our home. I know every corridor, every door, every section of the building, and it's just complete fire. These men and women from our brave firefighting services have just been unbelievably outstanding, and a huge thanks must be given to Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis and Alan Windy and the fire chief and the police chief in Cape Town for having put this fire under control, to the police for keeping calm outside yesterday. I think we don't give enough credit where credit is due. The inside building, I have seen it. The National Assembly, if you picture it, you can't, because the public gallery is half collapsed. It's all just burnt. It's completely destroyed. It's absolute devastation. It looks like a bomb went off inside. My heart, I won't lie, my heart is breaking, because to think that my home of 12 years now looks like this is devastating. But I swore an oath to the Constitution that I will uphold the Constitution, and that includes upholding Parliament. And I will be one of the people that make sure that Parliament is rebuilt. I will not let cretins write things on Facebook or on Twitter saying things like the blaze was beautiful and Cape Town, we are coming for you. We will not stand for that kind of action. This is the time that we stand together as South Africans who took a solid oath to look after our Constitution. And we must remember one thing: the grossest of humanity happened here, and the best of humanity happened here. Nelson Mandela was sworn in as our first democratic president here. The I am an African speech was given here. MPs have poured out their heart and soul in this building. There is too much at stake to let any racist cretin put anything like that at risk for us. So it's now time for MPs, for political parties, for various levels of government to come together, to stand together and make sure that we build and rebuild a stronger Parliament.
ANC Chief Whip Phemi Majodina, she spoke to us earlier on, and she has said that work for MPs will continue. The DA's position, what is it?
Absolutely. Work has to continue. There are many options that we have. We know that the presiding officers are in the Good Hope Centre. None of that was damaged, thankfully. So there's always the Good Hope Centre that can be used. I believe that Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis has offered the City Council chambers for Parliament to use, as well as the City Council, the actual City Council itself. which seats over 1,000 people for SONA. So we can operate. We're just going to have to think out of the box, and it's going to have to mean we put political ideology aside and we put being South African and being human and being trustworthy and giving trust to South Africans to show that we will not let this stop us. But it's, I look and I'm looking at volunteers, rescue and fire service volunteers. They are everywhere. And that's a show of humanity, that these people are willing to come out and risk their lives. No one knows the structural damage that could be occurring inside. But these men and women are putting their lives in their own hands, and that's the patriotism that we need to hold on to, and we need to take strength from the fact that so many patriots have come out to look after their parliament.
Natasha, some political parties are criticizing the security at this institution being a national key point. The DA's position on that?
I am one of those. I'm a big critic of the security of Parliament. If you've ever been to the Capitol in Washington, or if you've ever been to London's Houses of Parliament, or quite frankly, I was recently in the Ukraine, the security is taken very seriously. Here, I think we all know, we walk in and out, it's very haphazard. The reports that we're getting, there's a lot of fake news going around, but one of the reports is that the 49-year-old man that the Hawks have in custody simply jumped a fence because there were no police around. So we need answers to questions. What we need is a forensic investigation, but an independent forensic investigation, because you cannot investigate yourself. So SAPs can't investigate themselves. An independent investigator needs to assess what the situation was. Minister de Lille, who was contradicted many times yesterday by the police and fire services, said that the water valves were turned off on the sprinklers. We know that a massive amount of damage was caused because the sprinklers were never set off. The firefighters were here 10 minutes before the fire alarms went off. So these are questions that need to be answered. This is a national heritage site. Before being Parliament, it's a national heritage site. So the security was not up to scratch, and there are heads that must roll, and we must put people in charge of our heritage sites that know how to look after our heritage sites.
As one of the stakeholders here in this institution, are you aware of the allegations by Nehau that the Parliament's protection services are not allowed to work on weekends and public holidays due to budgetary constraints?
I have been told that. I have received a letter from Nehau themselves, Nehau being very open and honest with MPs about their feelings. This all has to be cleared up in the Chief Whips Forum, which will sit at 12 o'clock today. I know for a fact that I leave my office, I work an 18-hour day. When I leave the office, there's certainly no police downstairs at the entrance to my building. So I have seen with my own eyes a dramatic drop in security around the parliamentary precinct. My own office was broken into during the election period, which shows that there wasn't sufficient security. When I'm in the House, I don't feel that there is sufficient security. Please believe me, I'm not scared of anyone outside Parliament. I'm more worried about the people inside Parliament and what they can do, and they know that there is a lack of security. So I think that we do need to ask these very tough questions, and we need to find out how it is possible that the sprinkler system didn't go off in a national heritage site, that the alarms didn't go off, and where were the police? And if in fact a normal 49-year-old man who was no ninja, no special secret spy, just a normal South African jumped over the wall and managed to do this, then there is something seriously wrong with the security system.
Thank you very much for your time, Natasha.
Thank you very much.
That was the DA Chief Whip, Natasha Mazoni, talking to us as some political parties are coming here today to see for themselves the damage that has been done to this institution. Back to you at the studio, Desiree.
Lulama, thank you so much. And let's also thank Reinier Visser for staying with us through this conversation. Reinier, you've just heard those thoughts there, a national heritage site, a national key point, a building of pride in the country. What are the considerations going into conversations about repairs to the parliamentary building?
Yes, from what I can hear with the interviews is that the damage is actually far worse than I expected, especially to the National Assembly that where the roof collapsed and where the assembly chamber has been severely damaged. So one would have to start with investigating what is wrong, what needs to be repaired, what needs to be replaced. And you need to kind of repair it in a way that would be compatible with the historical nature of the building. So you cannot just put in modern materials. You have to use the original materials and techniques to repair it, which makes it a little bit longer, more expensive sometimes. But by and large, you need to kind of repair it so that it looks as intact as it did before the fire. It's interesting that this is actually a seat of parliament since 1885, when the first National Council of Provinces building was built, or the first parliament. It wasn't called NCOP at that stage. And it has been occupied by Parliament to this day, right through the colonial era, through the apartheid era, right into the democratic South Africa. So it is, from a social point of view, a very, very significant site, and that's why it's a national heritage site as it is.
Reinier, that compatibility you're speaking about, tell us about it, the kind of brief government has been giving you, just how you balance out keeping the heritage of the building, but also bringing in some level of modernization.
Yes, that's always the challenge, is how do you marry the old building with the modern technology? And we've done that at the NCOP, and it's always a challenge. You have to bring in the modern technology, the Wi-Fi, all of that, the air conditioning. Those buildings never had air conditioning before, and you don't want to destroy the old fabric in the process of doing that. And yes, that because of that, you have to do things a lot slower. People always expect things to happen quicker. But because of that care you have to take with the existing building, you have to take your time and do it in a very detailed way and in a very sensitive way. So where you bring in modern technology, it doesn't mar and destroy and deter from the historical fabric.
Yeah. I know that you are an architect and you worked on the conservation management plan 4 years ago. Is it 4 years ago or is it 4 years?
The conservation management plan was done probably 10 years or so ago.
Okay.
And then out of that conservation management plan came the refurbishment of the NCOP, which started kind of almost also 10 years ago, but the actual construction work started 4 years ago. So the construction work only took 4 years on the NCOP, and we completed that towards the end of last year.
So what I wanted to ask you is, even though you're an architect, are you engaging at all with the political conversation about it being time to move the seat of Parliament from Cape Town to elsewhere in the country?
No, we don't engage with that, the political aspects. From our point of view, we focus on the building itself, the heritage and the role. Of course, it is for a building very important that the building is kept active, that it is used on a day-to-day basis, and one cannot have all the old buildings turn into museums, because museums are, while they preserve the building, they don't preserve the function. That's why I emphasize the fact that these buildings have been parliamentary buildings since 1885, and therefore to keep it, in my mind, is more important than moving it somewhere else. But that's my personal opinion. I know there are political movements and ideas that it should move. But then the question becomes what happens to the old buildings if Parliament does move?
Reinier Visser, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us this morning.
Thank you.
Reinier Visser is an architect and has done work on the Parliament building. But as we said, that confirmation that a suspect has been arrested, taken in for questioning in connection with the fire at the Parliament building. The blaze gutted to the third floor of the old Assembly building. The roof of that structure has collapsed. The City of Cape Town's fire services says the ceiling inside the National Assembly has also collapsed, but the roof of that building is still intact. Let's now bring in Professor Mngomezulu for a political conversation on this story. Mngomezulu, thank you so much from the University of the Western Cape to talk to us about the history of Parliament and its importance. Thank you for making your time.
Thank you for having me, Desiree, and thank you to your listeners.
The importance of Parliament, looking back at the history of the country.
No, Parliament is an important institution in any country. And one of the most important issues that even if there is a change of guard in terms of political parties that are in power, Parliament as an institution remains intact. So that is why whenever there is an election, a Parliament then becomes an important institution which every political party aspires to occupy. It is a symbol, a national symbol that in fact identifies a country A from country B. So whenever there is a problem with Parliament as an institution, the heart of the country is in fact destroyed. And in the South African context, the one we're talking about now, this is unprecedented. And therefore, it means that all of us as South Africans should be worried, not just as political parties and not just as supporters of those political parties, but as South Africans, we have to be worried about this current situation because, as I say, nothing of the sort has ever happened before.
There's already questions around the credibility of what officials, top officials in government, have been telling us in terms of updates on this fire. What are the chances that this development could undermine democracy?
This development has already undermined democracy, and then it has also put into question the capability of our institutions, more especially security institutions. Under normal circumstances, you would expect that an institution that is declared a national heritage site, that is also declared a national key point, will be protected 24/7. And by the way, Desiree, it's not the first time that something like this happens, even though in the case of the building itself, we may be fine. We've seen something close to this during the reign or during the leadership of former President Thabo Mbeki, where someone found his way into the president's residence and in fact helped himself with wine for the whole weekend. So one would have expected that as a nation, we should have learned from that incident that we have to beef up security. Now, this situation is worse than what we saw during President Thabo Mbeki's time. So, which means that we have not learned from that situation, and that will be a cause for concern. Because if we don't protect Parliament as an institution, the question is, what about individuals then who are supposed to be protected by our security institutions? Here, I'm talking about SABC, I'm talking about the army, I'm talking about the intelligence, all those people who are supposed to protect our national institutions. So obviously then questions will be asked if indeed everyone was where he or she was supposed to be. If not, then questions have to be asked like the Member of Parliament, Natasha Mazon, was asking a couple of minutes ago, which means that there is more to it than it appears at face value.
So a guest we were speaking to earlier was saying that it doesn't matter whether it's criminal intent or political intent. Either way, as you say, it undermines democracy. What are your thoughts about these reports that a 49-year-old suspect has been accosted?
We should be worried, Desiree, because whenever we have something like this happening, you would expect that those who are saddled with the responsibility to protect these institutions should first and foremost speak in one voice. And then, of course, they must be quick in terms of collecting any intelligence information or any safety measures that might have not been followed, so that by the time they go to you as a media, then they must go there having spoken amongst themselves so that at least they send the same message. What we have been hearing right now have been just bits and pieces of information, and at times, in fact, conflicting information. So politicians on their own must find a point of convergence so that whenever they speak to the public as politicians and as MPs and as office bearers, they all read from the same script. That will then boost confidence amongst us as members of the South African public and say that our leaders are leading us well. But if there is any insinuation that some politicians are using this particular sad incident for political gains, then we should be worried, because it will mean that they put their own positions first before the safety of South Africans. So I personally would be happy if political parties across all the political spectrum, if they were to come together and then speak in one voice and avoid blaming one another. And Desiree, I was worried, in fact, when I read one of the pieces where someone from one of the political parties that are represented in Parliament called this incident a beautiful fire, and then in fact went to the argument that we've had before, that this gives us an opportunity to move Parliament from Cape Town to Gauteng and all of that. So I think that we don't need that, at least at this point. All we should be doing here is to blame this incident and establish how it happened and find ways of preventing it from happening again. Then we can talk about the other political issues afterwards. For now, the focus should be on this issue. We should all condemn it across all sectors of the community, and then, of course, find a way forward.
What will this mean for parliamentary activities going forward?
There will always be a possibility. Of course, I'm worried that some of the items that Parliament uses whenever there is Parliament sitting might have been destroyed. But then, of course, I hope that they keep them in a safe place. So if that was not the case, then we should be worried about that as well. But in terms of Parliament operating, I don't think that this should be, in fact, a serious disaster in terms of Parliament being unable to function. You recall that since 2020, Parliament has been operating virtually, as most of us have, in fact. So which means that there is a possibility for parliamentarians to still continue doing their work. They can't use this as an excuse for not executing their mandate. And then, of course, you might have heard also earlier on when Natasha Mazoni hinted that there are other institutions that have been made available to Parliament to use, including the City Council chambers and other buildings, Good Hope Centre and all of that. So in terms of Parliament's operations, I don't think we should be worried that much. Of course, there will be some disturbances. For example, if there were some items that were destroyed, there might be some delays here and there. Others might have kept some documents in hard form. If those are destroyed, then of course there will be some disturbances. But by and large, I don't think that parliamentarians should use this as an excuse and then fail to execute their mandate. There are bills to be passed. There are plans to be made. There is a State of the Nation address to be prepared for. There are a couple of other issues that need to be acted upon, and we cannot use this as an excuse and then delay that process, because that will mean that our people in South Africa will be negatively affected by this more than they've already been affected emotionally and otherwise when this incident was first reported.
I find it interesting that you say some political parties, but the EFF has come out strongly in support of a relocation. They're saying that they call on any money which would be set aside for repairs on the seems like irreversible damage, unless there's large-scale construction to be used to relocate Parliament to Tshwane, where the union buildings reside. What's your response to this?
No, that amounts to political negligence, Desiree, without just mincing any words. It's political negligence because Parliament is there in Cape Town for a reason, and then you have the union buildings out there. And if you say you want to relocate Parliament to Gauteng, use the correct platform and the correct time, not this time. For instance, when this debate started, I was one of the people who are saying that there is no need for Parliament to go to Gauteng or to remain in Cape Town, but I would be happier if we were to decide that we want to establish Parliament in the Free State, because the idea is to find a central place. You cannot have KZN as a central place, nor can you have Cape Town and Gauteng as a central place. If the argument is that you have a Parliament scattered all over, the Union buildings in Pretoria as the administrative hub, and then of course the executive, the Parliament building sitting in Cape Town, the judiciary in Free State and all of that. If the argument is that we end up using a lot of money, which is a fair argument, then find a central place. And then once you've found the central place, look at the cost implications of that and the amount of time you'll also need to make sure that you construct that building, and then we can engage in that discussion. But to invoke that argument at this point, for me, it amounts to political negligence. In fact, I was disappointed with the comments from the leadership of the EFF, more especially Honorable MP Ndlozi, and then there were some comments also from the deputy the deputy head of the party, that is Floyd Shibambo. So there have been some statements from the EFF which I think were unwarranted, at least at this point. So my suggestion would be they must desist from that and wait for the right moment to make that argument. When Parliament reopens, then they can put a motion through the right channels, have the issue debated, voted on, and then a decision can be taken. But to use this opportunity, I don't think it's warranted. That is why I call it political negligence.
Professor Mgomezulu, I'm going to ask you to hold on for a bit as we look at some tweets that have come through in relation to this conversation that we're having. Right, the first one is from Togo saying, the level of security in this country is worrying. How could an unauthorized person gain access to a national strategic key point? Was this pure criminal act, or is there a political agenda to it? The burning of the significant symbol and foundation of democracy is an act of treason. Food Forensics and Fraud FFCI saying, who or whom signed off the various occupational certificates for Parliament buildings at any time, any year, in the first instance? That's a good one, Food Forensics. William Goibaya saying, I can tell you now, mark my words, fire detection not working because of progress of findings from previous fire in 2021. William Goibaya again saying, a building such as the National Assembly and NCOP with no or interrupted automatic fire detection must be very concerning. And I suppose this is how South Africans are collectively feeling today. Very concerning that Parliament, government is not able to quickly respond and nip this in the bud. Prof?
No, Desiree, I agree entirely with the comments you've just read. In fact, at one point I was saying that as South Africans, I get a sense that we are slow learners in a way, especially our political leadership. Because if you see something happening in another country, you would take lessons from that and then take the precautionary measures and preventative measures so that you don't have the same thing happening in your own country. But then in the instance where you have something happening in your own backyard, like the example I made earlier on, where someone broke into President Thabo Mbeki's apartment. So I was saying that we should have learned from that, but it doesn't look like this is the case. And one of your viewers is making a point that it's not the first time that fire has broken up, and then it's not the first time that we have realized that our fire detectors are not working. So the question is, what did we learn from the first instance when this particular incident happened? Because had we learned from the first instance to see that our fire detectors are not working, something should have been done. It's not as if we don't have the money to do so. People like yourself and myself who get taxed every month. So government cannot then say we don't have money to do these kinds of things, because we get taxed every month. And our taxes are supposed to be protecting us. And in this instance, our taxes have failed to protect Parliament as an important institution in the country. So I think that our viewers are in fact making critical points, and they are making comparisons of what has happened before, what is happening now, and then the question is, how do we move forward then to avoid something similar from happening? Because if we fail to learn from this experience, obviously something will be wrong with the way we do things. Then we have to act swiftly so that we put measures in place to prevent something similar happening. Because we might have a worse situation than we've just seen today.
So the country is just fresh out of what has been termed the July uprisings and still looking for questions to those events. And now this. How committed is the government in terms of taking South Africa out of this mess? And also, can South Africans feel safe in the country?
Desiree, let's go to your first question. How committed are our politicians, or how committed is our government? In theory, our government is committed, but in principle, the opposite is true. And the reason for that is that our politicians have failed us. Currently, we have 14 political parties that are represented in parliament, with the ANC, that is the African National Congress, being the governing party. But in the just concluded local government elections, we've seen that our politicians don't care about South Africans. They took a firm decision that they are going to rally behind one another against the governing party, the ANC. Then the question is, are they putting South Africans first, or are they putting their political egos first? My answer is the latter. Because one of the leaders, in fact, the Economic Freedom Fighters leader, Julius Malema, is on record saying that they would even vote for a ghost as long as that ghost stood against the ANC. That tells you that there is very little concern about the lives of South Africans. There is very little concern about the safety of South Africans. Politicians are worried about satisfying their own political egos. So in this case, you would have expected that all the 14 political parties should be reading from the same script, should be speaking the same language, and should be putting their heads together to try and save government as an institution. But then the way things are, it's as if I want to be seen to be better than you, you want to be seen to be better than me, and as the saying goes, when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. So under normal circumstances, you would expect government and parliament to protect South Africans. But this is not the case. People are just concerned about their own jobs. They are concerned about their own political futures. They are concerned about satisfying their own political egos, as I've just said. So which means that the second question we're asking about the safety of South Africans, obviously we are not safe. We are not safe in our homes. We are not safe when we travel. And now we are not safe even when we're in parliament. And when the situation was described, the gallery that was referred to, I've been there several times. It's a nice atmosphere to be in parliament when parliament is in session, to see our leaders doing what they're supposed to do, and at times doing the opposite of what they're supposed to do. Now, to see and to hear that the gallery has been gutted down is a concern to most of us, more especially if you've been there and you've seen how it looks like. So it's a very sad moment. We should all be worried.
Professor Bheki Mngomezulu is with the University of Cape Town. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to us.
Thank you very much for having me, Desiree, and thank you to your listeners.
And as we continue to talk about this development, that 49-year-old man being taken in for questioning in connection with the fire in Parliament. Earlier, we spoke to Brigadier Nomthandazo Mbambo, who is the national spokesperson